All right, welcome back. We are on chapter 7, the flow of food, storage. Okay, so here we're going to start talking about labeling. All right, labeling is huge. You want to make sure that all your labels, items not in the original container, must be labeled. So if I take my bag of 50-pound flour and I put it into a bin, I need to make sure that my bin is labeled. Okay, so you can't just put things. If I take a can of tomato paste and I take it out and I put it in a plastic Cambro, guess what? I've got to make sure it's labeled. So you got to make sure it's clear. You got to make sure there's a date on it, and that you know what it is. I can't tell you how many times I've cleaned out a cooler and I pull this and I go, oh, what's this? I don't know what this is, and I just throw it away. Because guess what? When in doubt, what I tell you, when in doubt, don't. That's my motto, when in doubt, don't. If I don't know what it is and I can't tell you what it is, I'm going to throw it away. You know, when people mix up spices and stuff and don't I throw it away. I don't care. I don't know what's in it. I don't know, I throw it away. So labeling food packaged on site for retail. All right, so when this would be, let's say I'm going to have my own granola mix. All right, so the label has to be a certain way. Okay, so one, it has to have a common name. It has to have the quantity of the food. All right. If the item contains 2 or more ingredients, it has to list the ingredients, the sub-ingredients in descending order by weight. So that means the highest weight is going to be what the most is. So it'd be oats, right? So it'd be oats. List of any artificial colors and flavors and chemical preserves. It needs to be on there. And then name and place of business of the manufacturer, packer, distributor, and then source of each major food allergen. So if you have peanuts in it, it needs to be marked in there, allergy peanuts. The date marking, so here you've got a little bit of things you got to kind of learn and understand. Ready to eat foods must be marked if held for longer than 24 hours. So let's say that I'm going to make something, what's the example here? The 7 days. All right, so it needs to be ready to eat foods can be stored for the max of 7 days. So if I've talked about lasagna. If I make lasagna, I can store it in my refrigerator for 7 days. After 7 days, I got to throw it away. All right, so when it's for 7 days, you have to count the days that you begin the day. So you would need to put the day, and then you need to have a discard date. So you got to have 7 days from the discard date. So great example they have on the PowerPoint is potato salad prepared and stored on October 1st would be discarded date would be October 7th. Okay, so you have that on the label. Date marking operations use different systems for date marking, so everybody's a little different as long as you know what your dates are. Some write the date or the day on it or the date the food was prepared. So you know what, if I see something that says January 31st and now it's April, guess what? I'm throwing it away. Hopefully somebody's cleaned the cooler by then. If they haven't, that's bad. And some places are like that, unfortunately. Others will write the use by date on their labels. So, I mean, everybody's different. As long as you know the system, you train your employees, and everybody's on the same page, you're good. And that's the biggest thing. Commercially processed food, if a commercially processed food has a use by date, that is less than 7 days from the date the container is opened, then the container should be marked with the use by date as long as the date is based on food safety. So great example. Everybody knows that the milk has a use by date, right? So you have a sell by date and a use by date. So the sell by date is by a certain date it needs to be off their store shelf. And a use by date is by that date is when it's usually going to hit that it shouldn't be any good anymore. I hate to tell you, milk you usually can have anywhere. I've seen a good 4 days after the use by date. I still always smell it and see. Great example, my brother-in-law, gotta love him. He has spices and they're dried spices. Oh, it says used by date this, and he'll throw them away. I'm like, okay, really? It's dried herbs. There's nothing to it. It's fine. But you know, that's how he is. I just don't bother anymore. I had to stop. Date marking, when combining food with different uses, used by dates in a dish. So the example is the shrimp and sausage jambalaya. So prepared on December 4th. But the shrimp has a use by date of December 8th, and the sausage has a use by date of December 10th. So when do you throw the jambalaya away? December 8th. It has to be by the shrimp because that's your earlier date, okay? So it's just knowing that. Rotating food, rotation, you have your FIFO, which is first in, first out, okay? So usually what you're gonna do is, let's say I have heavy cream that comes in, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna take my new and I'm gonna put it to the back, all right? So that my old is up front and my new is in the back. So you're rotating. The biggest thing is making sure that you're rotating product. I can't tell you how many times, you know, great example is milk. Why? You can see the dates. I can tell what's new, what's not. People are always going to take the freshest. Hate to tell you that, but they will. Same with any kind of, let's say I have zucchini that comes in and I have zucchini already on my shelf. What am I going to do? I'm going to have the old up front where the new is in the back so that I'm using the old first. You got to make sure that your old, or guess what? It's going to go bad and you're going to throw it away. So you got to do that. First in, first out, identify the food items used by or expiration dates. Some places they'll have a Sharpie and they're literally writing on the dates as it comes in. So they know what's the newest product, what's the oldest product. I've seen that done too. I've seen kind of like if you're at a store marking the dates on it. Once shelved, you want to have the newest, the oldest up front, so you're using that first. Throw out food that has passed the manufacturer's use by date, because you just want, if it's bad, throw it away, make sure. And sometimes their use by date is it's gonna have a little cushion to it, and I've had that before. And sometimes it goes bad quicker, you know. It all depends on the batch, to be honest. Temperature guidelines is your TCS food, internal temperature is 41 degrees. Remember, we're going, what's our temperature danger zone? 135 to 41, right? So that's our temperature danger zone. So when you're storing meats and seafoods, it's got to be below 41 degrees. If I'm cooking something, it's got to be cooked above 135 degrees. One thing is the storage. When you're looking at storing your coolers and your speed racks, you don't want to overload your coolers and freezers because it's just not going to stay cool enough, especially if you're putting something a little warm in there. You got to be real careful with that. Now we have walk-in coolers that are as big as a room. I mean, they're huge, and walk-in freezers. So there's always enough space. It's not like your refrigerator at home where mine is just packed to the gills, especially during now. So when you're looking at your storage areas, you want to store food in a clean, dry location away from dust and other contaminants. So you want to make sure the chemicals are away, especially your dry storage area. The chemicals are different than any dried food. Never store food in areas, in a locker, okay, in your locker or dressing rooms, in a restroom or a garbage room. Don't do that. Mechanical rooms, things can catch fire. Unshielded sewer lines or leaking pipes or under stairwells. You never ever want to store anything in any of those, okay? You know, and I know people do different things at home, but in the industry, you just can't do that. Damaged, spoiled, or incorrect stored food, discard unsafe food, damaged, spoiled, incorrectly stored, missing its date, past its date, exceeds any time temperature requirement, you got to throw it away. Again, when in doubt, don't. That's my motto. Supplies. All right, so here you need to know that your store, when you store your items from the walls, it's at least has to be 6 inches off the floor. 6 inches or 15 centimeters. You will see that on the certification exam. It's on there too. Store single-use items, sleeve of single-use cups in the original package. So you know what, if I have a big old case that I go buy from Costco, think of how big that is, of coffee cups or whatever, you're going to keep it in the case and just pull the sleeve that you need. But 15 centimeters or 6 inches off the ground. It's got to be off the ground, lifted off the ground, everything. You cannot have anything below 6 inches, all right? Anywhere in your kitchen or your storage area. Containers, food containers must be intended for food. So I can't use anything that I had chemicals in and put food in there. You know, and it has to be a container that's used for food. We buy Cambros, we buy things that we use just for storing food, okay? Never use empty food containers to store chemicals, and never use chemical empties to store food, all right? Never put food in an empty chemical container. Nope, we just talked about that, and wrap all your food correctly. Cleaning, keep all storage areas clean and dry. You want to make sure there's no bugs around. You want to make sure that everything's nice and clean, that no spills, no leaks. Clean your dollies, your carts, your transporters, your speed racks. You want to make sure those are clean. Store food in containers that have been cleaned and sanitized. I really like to try and run my plastic containers through the dish area, through the dish room, the dish machine, because it will clean it really good. Store dirty linens in a clean, non-absorbent container or wash. Usually there's a bin. There's a bin for that. I'll do a video of kind of walking around and showing you guys some stuff around here, okay? Cleaning, keep all storage areas clean and dry. I just talked about that one. See, I get screwed up every so often, I promise. Store food, wrap or cover. All food needs to be wrapped and covered, because if it's on a shelf, it's going to leak down. So you got to be careful of that. Store raw meat, poultry, seafood separate from ready-to-eat food. So when you're looking at this slide, it's 718, you're looking at the storage order. Now, you will have, I promise you, on your certification exam, it will kind of have something like this. The biggest thing is it's stored by temperature, all right? It's stored by how it has to be cooked to. So usually the highest on my speed rack is going to be my ready-to-eat food, all right? And that means my lettuce, my cookies, my pastries, sandwich deli meat, cheeses, anything that I can use that is, I don't have to cook, I don't have to do anything to, is always going to be on top. Why? Because if anything, I can't cook it, I can't do anything with it, all right? Next underneath is going to be seafood. Seafood is, you got to cook seafood to at least 145 degrees, all right? So seafood is below your ready-to-eat food. Your whole cuts of beef and pork, usually your pork and your beef, pork can be cooked to 140 degrees. Beef, medium rare is 130 to 135, all right? So that's your least temperature. So you see how I've got temperatures, the higher my temperatures, and usually with the seafood and the beef, they're kind of 145. Beef can be 145, pork is 145. So you have all of that. Then you have your ground meat. Any kind of ground meat has to be cooked to 165 degrees. All right, and then underneath that is going to be your poultry, which always is 165. All right, so poultry is your turkey, your chicken, duck. Well, if I do a duck, I'm going to do, you guys will do, we'll fabricate a duck, and you'll use the duck breast, and I always serve it medium rare. So, because it's perfectly cooked that way. So, but think of temperatures when you're learning this top to bottom order. The temperatures is really what, when you're looking at it. And that's how it should be stored. And you got to learn this. The thing about all this is when you're looking at all of it, at the end of the day, this class is your building block for everything we do. Because when we're in the kitchens, we're going to be doing exactly all of this. We should be doing, and if we're not, then you need to call them on the carpet. Because guess what? We need to be doing that. Temperature, fresh meat, internal temperature 41 degrees or lower, or frozen. Containers and locations, separate storage. I always have my meat. Usually I have a meat cooler. When I was in hotels, I had a meat cooler and I had a vegetable cooler, and then I had my own dairy cooler. Because the smells, you don't want those to get in with each other. And you don't want any cross-contamination, so you want to kind of keep that separate. Eggs need to be air temperature at 45 degrees. If you're going to buy any egg substitute, you can keep that frozen. So you have that. Do not wash your eggshells before storing. You don't have to wash your eggshells or anything like that. Usually they're pasteurized. Your fish is going to be served on ice, is going to be stored on ice. Usually you're going to have a bin that is going to have holes in it, so you'll have the ice and the ice can drip into another bin. So you have two bins, because you don't want it to just sit in that, the water will get nasty if it's just sitting there and it can't drip. So you want to keep that frozen. If it is frozen, if you have fish that comes in frozen, you want to keep it frozen until you use it. You never want to just keep things sitting out. Shellfish, you can ice that down. Usually if I have any kind of mussels, clams, oysters, and they come in fresh and they're in the clam, they're in a bag, they come in, I leave it in the bag on ice, and it's in a drip pan, so it's not going to be just submerged in nasty liquid. Fruits, produce, you want to make sure that you keep it whole, and you keep it in the container. You can either do one of two things. You keep it in the case that it comes in, or you buy a bunch of Cambros and Lexans and you can pour it into there. If you're a big enough company, you're going to have the Lexans Cambros to pour it in. It keeps it organized, it keeps it looking fresh, and it keeps out bugs, to be honest. But you want to keep them separate. You don't want to mix. You want to make sure that things stay where they should, and in temperatures that they should. Like, great example, I didn't know this until probably 5 years ago. Fresh basil, don't put it in a cooler. You should always have it outside on a shelf. Why? It stays longer. Being in a cooler, the humidity, it breaks it down faster. I didn't know that. So you live and learn. Always you're living and learning. Please know that. Containers and locations, raw, whole, produce, anything that's cut, you want to make sure. Usually if you buy anything cut, you can get anything brunoise cut, which is your small dice. You can get it peeled. I used to get, when I was at the Swiss Hotel, it was a 4-star hotel in Buckhead, and you know what? I didn't have a lot of prep people, and we would order our potatoes already peeled. They'd come in a Cryovac bag, they were already peeled, and all I had to do is make mashed potatoes with them, cut them up, do whatever I wanted to do. Just made my life easier. But we kept them in the container. I didn't pull them out of it. Your guidelines, it tells you the humidity. You don't need to really worry about that. Your avocado, bananas, pears, and tomatoes can be at room temperature if you like. Usually the only thing, bananas and avocados are usually the only thing that I keep at room temperature. Now, if you start looking and you don't have enough space, you know what? You can easily put tomatoes and onions underneath the table too. Poultry, 41 degrees. You want to make sure that it stays in whatever the container is, especially with any kind of splashing or anything. You don't want the salmonella to spill over into anything else. And you always keep your meat on ice. Always drip pans and ice. Your ROP, your ready reduced oxygen packaging, that's your Cryovac. You know what? It can be just either frozen or thawed, however you want it to use it. If it comes in frozen, keep it in the freezer until you need it. And then if you don't, you're fine. If you're blowing through it that fast, so it all depends. Temperature, you've got your unopened room temperature, pasteurized creamer, stuff like that. If it's been pasteurized, you can keep it at room temperature. Canned goods, I've got a can rack just like that in the back. Again, I'll kind of do a little walkthrough of our area. Guidelines, damaged cans, if your cans come in, usually you're going to get like 6 cans to a case, and you just put them on your can rack. Dry food, you want to store high storage temperatures. You're just going to it's cool. It's usually a cooler space because you're back there by the coolers and all of that. Store all of that dry. Just keep it all dried and you're fine. So here I'm going to stop this and I'm going to walk to the back and I'll do a little video showing you different things. Okay? All right. Talk to you in a second.